Hi everyone and welcome back to a new episode of BWD. Today we're gonna learn how to code rock, paper, scissors. We're gonna play against the computer and be able to do it multiple times. If you're new to this channel or you're back watching this video, do not forget you can find timestamps in the description below. And all the code that you're gonna see in this episode is available on GitHub. Just look for the project repo, link in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Before jumping straight into coding, let's go to the board and make sure that we have a clear understanding of what we're gonna do. Let's start by having a close look to the game's rules. There are 3 moves available for each player: rock, scissors, and paper. Each one wins against one of them and loses against the other one. For example, rock always wins against scissors but loses against paper. On the other hand, scissors will always beat paper but lose against rock. And finally we have paper, which always wins against rock but loses against scissors. Got lost? Don't worry about it. Here's the trick. To get the winner, just have a look at the board and go clockwise. You see it now? Great. And now let's have a look at the algorithm. First, we're gonna start by asking the user for his move. Next, we're gonna get the computer's one. And third, we're gonna display the images for both of them. Next, we have to figure out who is the winner, and we're gonna display it at step number 5. Finally, we're gonna ask to the user if he's down for another try. So let's have a look now at a real example. Let's say the player is gonna type in rock and the computer is gonna go with paper. After displaying both images, we're gonna figure out that the player has lost. So we're gonna display the message to let the user know and right after ask for another match. Great, hopefully we are on the same page. And now let's start coding this. Alright, let's get started with step number 1. We're gonna store the user move into the player variable, which we can obtain using the input function. This basically lets the user type in inputs at the keyboard. If you never heard about it, you can discover more in episode number 1 of this series. Next, we have step number 2, where we're gonna store the computer choice into the computer variable. But how can we do this? You might think this is complicated, but in reality it's not. The idea is pretty simple. First, let's define the moves variable. And then let's import the random module to use the choice function. This is pretty handy because when we give as an input a list, we're gonna get out of it a random element. Pretty easy, right? And now let's move ahead with step number 3. Here we should display images, but for now let's display the moves only. Okay, let's give it a try to see if this works or not. I'm gonna go with rock. Great, our choice is correctly displayed and the computer chose paper instead. Oof, what a bummer losing against your own program. Okay, now it's time for displaying the images, but how can we do it? A simple and immediate way to go about this will be to write down an if-else schema. At each statement, we check the content of the play variable, and if that matches the move in the statement, we're gonna display the corresponding image. For example, in the first one, if the player variable is equal to rock, we're gonna display the rock image. However, for now, let's just use placeholder for the images instead. Great, and now let's give it a try. I'm gonna go with rock also this time, and great, we got the rock placeholder. So this works, but can we do better? Because the if-else schema works, but it's not really readable, it's a little bit noisy, right? Let's open the Python interactive shell to figure this out. In the previous episode, we explored a new type of data structure, the dictionary, and we have learned that this comes very handy when we have to define a link between 2 elements. And you think about it, this is exactly what we have here. The 2 elements are the move and its image. So we can define a variable called image where we're gonna store a dictionary. The keys are gonna be the moves and the values are gonna be the images. For now, again, let's go ahead with placeholder. Let's suppose that the player is gonna go with rock now. To get the image that we're gonna display, we have just to type in image.get and provide the player variable. And here we go, we got exactly what we wanted. And this always works. If player chooses paper instead, we don't need the if-else schema anymore. We have just to use the get method. Pretty awesome, right? Now let's learn something new about dictionaries. An alternative to the get method is passing the key in between square brackets. So now you may ask, but what is the difference then? Well, as we've seen in the previous episode, when we use the get method and we pass a key that is not stored in the dictionary, we're gonna get nothing out of it. Instead, if we use the square bracket syntax, we're gonna get an error. As you can see, Python throws a key error message saying we don't have that key in this dictionary. I hope this is clear. If not, let me know in the comment section below. Now let's implement this in our program. Of course, we're gonna do the same also for the computer image. And now let's write down the image dictionary. Let's start by zooming out a little bit so we can see it better. Next, let's do exactly what we had done a few seconds ago, but this time with the real images. You can find them in the GitHub repo, link in the video description below. Here we go. As you can see, each key is a move, but this time for the value we have the actual image and not the placeholder. Great, and now let's zoom in to see better the code and give it a try. Alrighty, we got the images. Before moving ahead though, let's do a little bit of refactoring here. Let's drop the moves variable as this is not needed anymore. That's because we can get the moves directly from the image dictionary using the keys method. However, there is a catch here. The choice function needs as an input a list, but the keys method does not return that. So to make this work, we're gonna use the list built-in function. And the name does exactly what it says. It takes an input and returns it as a list. Perfect, everything works fine. And now it's time to code step number 4. As you might have guessed, also here we can go ahead with an if-else schema. First we're gonna check if the player variable is equal to the computer variable. In that case no one wins, otherwise we have to check all the possible scenarios. As you can see, this is already pretty long. So my question to you is there a better way of doing this? Also in this case, dictionaries can help us. Suppose we have created a variable called computer_lose, which contains a dictionary. And when we pass as a key the player variable, we're gonna get out of it the move against the player wins. So for example, if the player chooses rock as move, then we know that rock always wins against scissors. And that is exactly the value that we're gonna get out of this dictionary. And the same is gonna happen also for the other moves. If the players go with scissors, we're gonna get paper out of it. If he goes with paper, we're gonna get rock. And now let's refactor the code. In the else branch, we're gonna have another if-else schema, but this time it's gonna be way shorter. In the if statement, we're gonna check if the computer variable is equal to the value that we get out of the dictionary when we use as key player. If the statement is true, then the player has won. Otherwise, the computer has. So this is a really great example that shows how dictionary can be used to replace very long and complicated if-else statements. But before considering this done, we have to write down the computer_lose dictionary. Great, and now let's give it a try. I'm gonna go with rock also this time and, well, the code is working, but what a bummer, even this time I lost. Anyway, let's go back to coding and get this done now. Last step, we have to ask to the player if he's down for another game. And from the previous episodes, we know that in this kind of scenarios, we have to go back to the previous points. That's why we're gonna implement a while cycle. First, we're gonna ask the question to the player and check if his answer is equal to yes. We're gonna apply the lower method to make the answer case insensitive and save the result into the gameIsOn variable. Now let's go back to step number 1 and define the gameIsOn variable equal to true, and right after the entry point of the while cycle. Great, and now let's give it a go. I'm gonna go with rock also this time. Okay, let's try with paper now. No way, this is getting ridiculous. I mean, is this bad luck or is there a bug in my program? Well, whatever, let's give it another go, but this time let's type in a move that is not available. And the code broke. But this is totally fine because there is no yellow move available, right? Let's go back to the code now and fix this. So the idea here is pretty simple. Let's define the player variable equal to none before getting into the cycle. Next, before asking for the player move, let's write down another while cycle. Here we're gonna check if the value in the player variable is actually a key of our dictionary. If that is not the case, we're gonna keep asking to the user for his move. Then let's make this case insensitive by applying the lower method, and finally let's update the player variable with none. Oh great, I finally won a game, and everything seems to work, so let's give it another try. Well, what can I say? Probably this is not my lucky day for recording this. Anyway, before considering this done, there is one thing left to do. As you have might noticed, every time that we go for another game, the screen is not cleared. And from episode number 2 of this series, we know that we can use the os module to clear this out. Way better like this, right? So probably this is not my lucky day, but at least you learned something useful here. Okay, we have finally come to the end of this video. If you have any question or feedback, just write it down in the comment section below. Do not forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel to not miss next week's episode. In the meantime, if you wanna do more, just check the GitHub repo where you can find the next steps for this exercise. And with that said, see you in the next one. Ciao!